Good morning, gentlemen. I am Manikandan from Center for Environment and Marine Studies, CEMS, from KFUPM, and I will be the moderator for the session. On behalf of CEMS, I would like to welcome you all for the second day of the Technical Forum on Blue Economy in the Arabian Gulf Red Sea, Status, Opportunities, and Challenges. The theme for today's session is Blue Carbon, the carbon captured by the world's ocean and coastal ecosystems. So in this session, we have two distinguished speakers who will be presenting on the blue carbon from two extreme environments, the tropical desert environment and the freezing polar environment. The duration of each session will be half an hour, followed by a Q&A session for 15 minutes. So during the Q&A session, you have two options to raise the questions. One by using the raise your hand option and another by typing your questions in the chat box. For those of you who have not used Zoom meetings, the raise your hand option could also be enabled by using the keyboard shortcut Alt and Y for Windows and Option plus Y for Mac. Our first talk is on blue carbon in the Red Sea and the Arabian Gulf, current status and knowledge gaps, which will be presented by Dr. Moritz Heinle. Dr. Heinle is a phytoplankton ecologist with expertise in phytoplankton taxonomy, physiology, and marine biogeochemistry. So he received his master's degree in biological oceanography from Christian Albrechts University Kiel in Germany. And for his PhD, he studied the effect of different environmental parameters on Coccolithophores, a group of calcifying macroalgae. So this included laboratory experiments with cultures grown under different light, temperature, and nutrient regimes, and subsequent physiological and biogeochemical analysis of these cultures. So the results from the laboratory were later used to parameterize the global biogeochemical model Plankton 10, and he compared the model output to that of field and satellite data. So for this work, he was awarded PhD degree from the University of East Anglia in England in 2014. He joined the Center for Environment and Marine Studies in KFUPM as a research scientist in July 2015 to lead the phytoplankton study of the Sustaining Research Project Phase 6. And currently, he is the subgroup leader of Seawater and Planktonology group of the Marine group in CEMS. So Dr. Heinle has attended several international conferences and workshops and has published 2 papers in top journals. He has also contributed chapters in 2 books on the marine ecosystems of the Red Sea and Arabian Gulf. Without taking much of your time, I would like to welcome Dr. Heinle to deliver his talk. Dr. Heinle, the floor is yours.
So thank you for this nice introduction, Dr. Mani. Share the screen. So you can all see my screen now?
Yes, please. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So my talk will be on blue carbon in the Red Sea and the Arabian Gulf, the current status and knowledge gaps. So first question is, what is blue carbon? Blue carbon is mainly defined as like the carbon stored over long time periods in the soil of coastal and marine ecosystem. It is mainly buried in roots and buried organic litter. And the most important components in the Arabian Gulfs are mangrove forest, seagrass beds, and salt flats, which are also called sabkha. Starting with the mangroves, mangroves are intertidal trees along the tropical and subtropical shorelines. And for the northern hemisphere, the Arabian Gulf and the Red Sea are the northernmost limit for mangrove forest. And besides being important for the carbon storage, they are also important nursing ground for many marine organisms. They provide protection for coastal erosion as well. In the Arabian Gulf, 2 species of mangroves are known, whereas in the Red Sea, 4 species are found. But in both ecosystems, Avicennia marina is the most important species. Estimation of mangrove coverage can be done using satellite imagery. The normalized different vegetation index, shortly NDVI, has been widely used to identify mangrove canopy. but the patchiness of small mangrove forests might limit this method depending on the satellite image resolution. Furthermore, the NDVI index has issues with high and low tide, since it's estimating the canopy over the sea level. So the estimates will change depending on if we have high or low tide. So the estimate will be higher during low tide than they are during high tide. To counter this, there has been a recent development of something called the Submerged Mangrove Recognition Index, SMRI, which now has started to be used for identification of mangrove canopy and circumventing this issue of high and low tide. Until now, there have been two big estimates of mangroves in the Arabian Gulf, one from Milani in 2018, and the second one from Al-Mahashir, also in 2018. And they gave estimates of 197 square kilometers, respectively 166 square kilometers. Both studies applied the NDVI, but the main difference was that Milani included the Gulf of Oman as well. And if you look at the numbers, you can see that the main differences are that Milani included the Oman, which is here with around 5 square kilometers, and the Iran as well, which has a large area in the Gulf of Oman as well. So that the estimate for Iran, including the Gulf of Oman, is around 30 square kilometers higher than the study by Al-Mahashir, which only included the Arabian Gulf. If you look at the numbers for the countries that are part of the Arabian Gulf, the Emirates, Qatar, Bahrain, or Saudi Arabia, the numbers are more or less the same. One difference is that Al-Mahashir included a small area of mangroves in Kuwait as well, but she also noted in her paper that this estimation is questionable. So it's not quite clear if these are mangroves or something else. And so, again, this is the picture of the Arabian Gulf with the mangroves estimates in green. So you can see the largest areas can be found here in the Emirates, around here, and also fairly large areas in Iran, whereas in Qatar, Bahrain, or Saudi Arabia, there are only fairly small spots. And so this is big. Yeah, one of the problems identifying mangrove forest, that distribution is very patchy and very small. Milani in 2018, they also did an estimate of the development of the mangrove forest. And what they found was that between 1977 and 2017, there was a change of there was an increase in the mangrove area of around 133 square kilometers, which is about an increase of around 200% between 1977 and 2017. And based on the area, the biggest change was found in the Emirates with an increase of 66 square kilometers, and Iran with an increase of 47 square kilometers. But if you look at the percentage changes, then changes was most significant in Qatar, where we have an increase of more than 6,000%, and Saudi Arabia, where the increase was around 750%. Between the year 2000 and 2017, the increase was quite a bit, well, smaller. Again, the main increase was found in area-wise in the Emirates with 31 square kilometers and Iran with 14 kilometers. But the most significant increase percentage-wise was in Saudi Arabia with 470% and Qatar with 250%. But what you can see is that in Saudi Arabia, there was more or less like a continuous increase, whereas in Qatar, the main increase was had to occur between 1977 and the year 2000, whereas the increase then between the year 2000 and 2017 was quite a bit lower. One thing that has been noted is that some of this increase between 1977 and 2017 is most likely also due to improvements of the remote sensing technology. So back in 1977, for all these measurements, the Landsat satellite was used, and the resolution of the Landsat satellite increased from 80 meters for 1 pixel in 1977 to 30 meters in 2017. So there was a significant increase in the resolution of the satellite, which most likely has also led to the identification of mangrove forests that had not been detected back in the satellite pictures from 1977. Furthermore, as I pointed out earlier, there's this issues with the NDVI that it has problems detecting submerged mangrove forests. So there's an issue between low and high tide. And to work against this, there was this Lee and al. Designed a SECAP index, the SMRI. And if you look at these pictures, you can see that. So this is from the Arabian Gulf, and you can see that in both pictures there was a submerged mangrove area of 8 to 10 hectares. So the total area estimated by NDVI would have been around would miss around 10 hectares, and that's only in this small area of the Arabian Gulf, of Saudi waters of the Arabian Gulf. So applying this new index for the complete Arabian Gulf will further increase the area covered by mangroves. For the Red Sea, there's been one estimate so far from Al-Mahashir from 2016. And what you can see is that the mangrove area in the Red Sea is significantly lower than in the Arabian Gulf, with a total of around 135 square kilometers. And the area along the African coast is slightly higher, with 78 square kilometers than along the Arabian coast with 57 square kilometers. Also, compared with the Arabian Gulf in the Red Sea, the increase in mangrove biomass was much lower. Still, there was a continuous increase in 1972, but it was only an increase of around 15 square kilometers for the total area, and of these 9 square kilometers found for the African coast, and an increase of 6 square kilometers along the Arabian coast. So in percentage, this change is between 12 and 13%, comparing to over 100% in the Arabian Gulf. And also again, so some of this increase from 1972 to 2013 might be due to improvements in the remote sensing technology. So this is just, giving a picture of the mangroves in the Red Sea. And what you can find is that in this area along the African coast, there's been the main increase in mangrove coverage between 1972 and 2013. And now coming to the interesting part where we're calculating the carbon sequestration. So how much carbon can be stored in the mangrove ecosystems? There's been a range of estimations of measurements being done. And what we have to differentiate is that there is an organic carbon content component as well as an inorganic carbon component. So the organic carbon content is biomass, leaf biomass, and organic biomass, whereas the inorganic component is mainly comprised of carbonates. For the Arabian Gulf, there have been two measurements of organic carbon sequestration rate, which are from 2018 and 2019. GeoSAC et al. Found a mean carbon sequestration rate of 19 gram carbon per square meter in year, whereas Crooks et al. Reported an estimate of 53 gram carbon per square meter in year. For the Red Sea, there had been one study from Al-Mashir et al. 2017 that reported a sequestration rate of 15 grams organic carbon per year. And all these three together, for my calculations, I took the mean of these, which gives you an estimate of 29 grams carbon per square meter a year. As you can see, the estimations for inorganic carbon are significantly higher, like more than around 100-fold, 10-fold higher than for organic carbon. For the Arabian Gulf, we have an estimate of 290 gram carbon per square meter a year. For the Red Sea, there have been measurements done that found a rate of around 230 gram carbon per year. One thing that's notable is that the rates for organic carbon sequestration that were found for the Arabian Gulf and the Red Sea are much lower compared with the global means, which have been reported as 163 carbon, organic carbon per year, respectively 170 gram organic carbon per year by Breithaupt et al. 2012 and Perez et al. 2018. And now, using this area estimates that we have together with the carbon sequestration rate, gives us an estimate of the potential for carbon storage in mangrove ecosystems. And taking the area from Milani 2018 gives us an estimate of around 55,000 tons per carbon a year. The estimate of Al-Mashir, which is a bit lower because she didn't include the Gulf of Oman, gives you around 48,000 tons of carbon per year. And for the Red Sea, the estimate is 35,000 tons per carbon a year. But you can see that in all ecosystems, because as we just saw in the previous slide, the rates of sequestration for inorganic carbon are much higher than those for organic carbon. So the inorganic carbon is dominating the carbon sequestration in mangrove ecosystems. So now we're going to seagrass next. Seagrass are the only flowering plants that can continuously grow submerged in seawater. They are important nursery ground for marine organisms and also an important food source for many animals such as sea turtles or dugongs in the Arabian Gulf and the Red Sea. They can also serve. They also serve for seabed stabilization with their roots. In the Arabian Gulf, 3 species have so far been identified. In the Red Sea, we find 12 species. But again, in both ecosystem, Halodule universis is the main species, the most important species. Now again, for estimation of seagrass coverage, so far it is mainly relying on traditional observations because remote sensing of seagrass is affected by the water depth and turbidity interferences. However, recent improvement in the satellite sensor resolution and drones with LIDAR and hyperspectral sensors have improved the methods. So by now, I think it might be possible to do remote sensing estimates of seagrass in the Arabian Gulf and the Red Sea. But until now, such studies are not available. So we're only relying on in situ measurements of the seagrass. So people going to the areas, identifying the seagrass and calculating the area. So Aftermeyer and Schuel in 2012, they did a literature summary of the surveyed areas in the Arabian Gulf, and they come up with a total area of 6,950 square kilometers, where the main areas, the biggest areas, can be found in the Emirates with 5,500 square kilometers, and Bahrain with a maximum estimate of around 1,000 square kilometers. Green and Short back in 2003, they did a maximum estimate for the Arabian Gulf, and they came up with a maximum of 10,000 square kilometers. And so this number is they did this by taking the bathymetry of the Arabian Gulf and making the assumption that 50% of all waters that is shallower than 5 meters is covered by seagrass. So that's how they came up with their estimate of 10,000 square kilometers. But if you look at the summary of the actually surveyed areas for the UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, and Kuwait, with around 7,000 square kilometers, it's not so different. So, for example, if you then include Iraq and Iran, you might get fairly close to the 10,000 square kilometers. For the Red Sea, I wasn't able to make a really full estimation. There was little information available on seagrass coverage, even on national scales. For Saudi waters of the Red Sea, there was one estimate by Bruckner et al. 2012 that surveyed at least big regions, big patches of the Saudi coastline of the Red Sea, and they come up with an estimate of 67.5 square kilometers in Saudi waters. Now we're going again to the carbon sequestration. There have been two estimations for organic carbon in the Arabian Gulf. We have an estimate. We have measurements of 9 gram carbon per square meter a year. For the Red Sea, we have a mean measurement of 6.8 gram carbon per square meter a year, which gives us a mean of 7.9 gram carbon per square meter a year. Again, the rates for inorganic carbon are noticeably higher than the ones for organic carbon. So for the inorganic carbon, we only have one study that measured it so far, and they came up with a mean estimate of 130 gram carbon per square meter a year. But again, for organic carbon, if you compare it to other global measurements for organic carbon, they range between 1.8 and 84 gram carbon per square meter a year. So yeah, the estimates for the Arabian Gulf and the Red Sea are within the range, but also it makes it very clear that the range of carbon sequestration rate for seagrass is very large, from 1.8 to 84, and it's relying very much on the species that is measured. So the carbon sequestration rate for seagrasses is to a large extent, to a large degree, depending on the species that is present. And so now again, taking the estimates for the area together with the estimates for carbon sequestration gives us estimates of the potential for carbon storage in soil. And for the Arabian Gulf, we get an estimate of around 100,000 tons carbon per year. For the Red Sea, because there's only like this small estimate of 67.5 square kilometers of seagrass area that I have so far, that's why the potential for carbon storage in the Red Sea is very small at the moment. But for the Arabian Gulf, where we have a good estimate of the seagrass area, we get around 100,000 tons per year. The third component of for carbon sequestration for blue carbon in the Arabian Gulf and the Red Sea are SAPCA, the salt flats. They are evaporate salt flats in the area, and they're characterized by microbial mats, including cyanobacteria, green algae, fungi, and bacteria. In the Arabian Gulf, there's an estimated area of 3,600 square kilometers of coastal SAPCA on the eastern Arabian Peninsula by Schultz et al. 2015. And they used MODIS satellite to calculate this estimate. The most extensive areas can be found in the Emirates and Saudi Arabia. And yeah, this is from their publication, where you can see here the red areas. The red areas are the potential SAPCAs. So you can see that there's a significant SAPCA area also here inland. But for my study, the 3,600 square kilometers that I mentioned before are only the coastal SAPCAs, so the directly at the coast. And for the total SAPCA area, so including the inland SAPCA, the study from Schultz et al. Gives a total estimate of around 36,000 square kilometers. For the Red Sea, again, so far I couldn't find any good estimate for the for SAPCA areas in the Red Sea, so they're not included in the further calculations. So far, we have two studies that did measurements of carbon sequestration in SAPCA areas. Cusack et al. They report 8 gram organic carbon per square meter a year, and Saderne et al. 2018 they studied the inorganic component and report a rate of 100 gram carbon per square meter a year. And again, adding the area, or joining the area together with the carbon sequestration rate, we get an estimate of around 400,000 tons of carbon per year that can be stored in the soil. And so now here for the summary. Again, we have the mangroves that are mangrove areas where we have the potential to store around 50,000 tons of carbon per year. The seagrass areas are the most important component, where we can store around 1 million tons of carbon every year. And the Sapka areas give us an additional 400,000 tons of carbon a year, which gives us a total of 1.5 million tons of carbon per year that can be stored in the Arabian Gulf and the Red Sea ecosystems. Yeah, like I said, we have a total of around 1.5 megatons of carbon per year that can be stored in the Red Sea and the Arabian Gulf. Seagrass meadows are the most important component for carbon sequestration. They make up around 67% of the total potential, but highest sequestration rates are found in mangrove forests. So there might be a potential, like by increasing the area of mangrove forests, to further increase the total potential for carbon sequestration in the Red Sea and the Arabian Gulf. What is missing right now is data on seagrass and Sapka coverage, missing particularly for the Red Sea. For the Arabian Gulf, we could use some data on the seagrass additional data on the seagrass coverage as well. So for both areas, there hasn't been any estimation of seagrass using satellite remote sensing, which might add to this. And also there's information lacking on marshland carbon sequestration rate. For example, we have the Mesopotamian marshes that cover more than around 36 square kilometers. And so far, these have been included from studies so far, but there has to be some potential for carbon sequestration rates, for carbon sequestration in these areas as well. And yeah, so with this, I thank you very much for listening to the presentation, and I'll take any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Moritz, for the wonderful presentation. So now it's Q&A session. So please feel free to raise your hand or send your questions by chat. Yeah, that's a question from Lynn. Dr. Lynn?
Hi, Morris, thank you for the wonderful presentation. I noticed that there is increase in the mangrove in the both sides, in the Arabian Gulf and in the Red Sea. It's very clear that the increase in mangrove is more apparent in the Arabian Gulf, while in the Red Sea, increase is like marginal.
Yeah.
So can you kind of elaborate what is possible hypothesis for that?
No, sorry, I don't. But I think at least like for the Arabian Gulf, there have been long-term mangrove
Restoration
like mangrove nursery and replanting mangroves in the Arabian Gulf countries for a long time, like since it started back in the 70s or the 80s, and in Iran, I think they even started in the 1960s. And I don't know about such program for the Red Sea countries. So this might be the most important component, that in the Arabian Gulf countries there have been just much more regrowing of mangrove areas.
Okay, any more questions? Dr. Amal, yes. Yeah. Dr. Amal?
Dr. Moritz, thank you for the very wonderful presentation. I would like to ask, what are the major impacts of coastal development to the mangrove and the seagrass, particularly in the Arabian Gulf? Are we seeing proper mitigation measures or restoration efforts to replenish the impacted areas?
So from what I know, yes, yeah. So for this, I mainly have to focus on the Saudi water, so I can say it for the Saudi coastlines, and there from what I hear and see so far, there have been the role of mangroves for the blue carbon, and also for to like protect the coastline from sedimentation has been noticed, and the regrown, like when there are developmental activities in the Arabian Gulf, in the Saudi coastline at least, there's also they're also accompanied by regrowing of mangroves in other areas to come up to for the loss during the developmental activities.
But do you think removing the mangroves from their natural place and putting them somewhere else, do you think the mitigation measure to do that are effective or efficient here in the Arabian Gulf, particularly in the Saudi waters? Because we have seen a lot of mangrove stand in Stanura, in Dammam, that are really already enclosed, and then they die from no water exchange. So moving them somewhere else, I think, may not be an effective.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I thought, like, from what I heard so far, is that the new mangrove areas would be are replanted in areas that seem to be very suitable for mangroves, or even already have mangrove coverage in the area, so that these replanting measurements are positive or work out. But yeah, I think maybe we need to see in the future if these approaches are sufficient. But again, like the mangrove replantation that have been going on since the 1960s, 1970s in Iran, Qatar, the UAE, Saudi Arabia as well, they seem to have been very efficient, because there's a continuous increase in the mangrove area that we see from those times until today.
Thank you, Dr. Moritz.
Dr. Moritz, there is a question in the chat box. So unfortunately, I couldn't read his name. It's in Arabic. He's asking, how can we get seagrass Arabian Gulf steady?
Yeah, so that's a really good point, because that's something that's really missing at the moment. And like I said, so far in the Arabian Gulf, as well as in the Red Sea, we're only relying on in situ measurements. Like we're only relying on local studies where people go to the mangrove areas and estimate the areas on site. But I think by now, the methodology for remote sensing of seagrass is at a point where it hopefully will be possible to get seagrass areas estimates from satellite technology, and so this would be the way forward to get estimates of seagrass coverage in the Arabian Gulf and the Red Sea as well. But yeah, so far there have been no remote sensing study for seagrass.
Thank you, Dr. Moritz. I think if there are no questions, we can go to the next presenter. I think there's a question from, okay, that's it.
Yeah, and then there was one point here from Dr. Droidas. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so
Thank you.
yeah, Dr. Hanan would be I think the main specialist for this topic on blue carbon. And yeah, but I think she's busy at the moment, so
Yeah, she's busy.
she might
Yeah,
come
yes.
come back later on. Then. Okay.
Fine. Thank you, Dr. Moritz. I think.